Have you ever witnessed a moment so raw and honest that it changed someone's life forever? That's exactly what happened when Sarah's casual comment at a company dinner received an unexpected response from the quiet single father who worked in accounting. Stay with me until the end to discover how one whispered truth transformed two broken hearts, and if you're touched by this story, please like this video and subscribe to our channel for more emotional journeys that remind us of the power of authentic connection. The restaurant buzzed with the typical Friday night energy, clinking glasses, bursts of laughter, and the warm glow of candlelight dancing across faces. Eastridge Marketing's quarterly team dinner was in full swing, with employees scattered around a long table adorned with half-empty wine bottles and the remnants of appetizers. Sarah Matthews, the company's ambitious 34-year-old CEO, sat at the head of the table, her designer blazer perfectly pressed despite the long workday. Sarah watched as her creative director, Melissa, showed everyone pictures of her husband's elaborate anniversary surprise, a recreated version of their first date, complete with the same restaurant table, identical outfits, and even tracking down the same waiter from 7 years ago. He remembered every single detail, Melissa gushed, swiping through photos on her phone. He even found the exact wine we drank that night. Can you believe that? The table erupted in appropriate "us" and "how sweets," while Sarah smiled politely, swirling the remaining Cabernet in her glass. After the chorus of admiration died down, she couldn't help but murmur, just loud enough for those nearby to hear, "I wish someone would love me like that." She hadn't meant to say it aloud, it was the kind of vulnerable thought that usually remained safely locked behind her carefully constructed professional facade. Sarah immediately tried to recover with a light laugh, but the words had already escaped, hanging in the air between her and the handful of employees close enough to hear. Among them was Daniel Parker, the quiet single father who joined their accounting department just 8 months ago. At 38, he kept mostly to himself, efficient in his work but rarely participating in office social events. Tonight was an exception. He'd mentioned something about his regular babysitter being unexpectedly available. Sarah knew little about him beyond his impressive resume and the fact that he had a daughter he clearly adored, judging by the framed photo on his desk. Daniel's eyes met hers briefly across the table, and something in his expression, a flash of recognition, perhaps, made Sarah look away quickly, uncomfortable with her own momentary transparency. The dinner continued, conversation flowing to safer topics like the upcoming client pitch and plans for the holiday party. Sarah had almost forgotten her slip when, as the evening wound down and people began gathering coats and calling rideshares, Daniel approached her table. "Ms. Matthews," he said quietly, his voice barely audible above the restaurant's ambient noise. "May I speak with you for a moment?" Sarah nodded, curious about what her usually reticent employee might want to discuss outside of work hours. She expected a question about the upcoming quarterly reports or perhaps a request for time off. Instead, Daniel sat in the chair beside her, his eyes focused on his hands as they rested on the table. For a moment, he seemed to be gathering courage. "What you said earlier," he began, his voice low but steady. "About wishing someone would love you that way." Sarah felt heat rise to her cheeks. "Oh, that was nothing, just a silly comment after too much wine," she said dismissively. Daniel shook his head slightly. "No, I don't think it was." He paused, then continued, "I recognized it because I've thought the same thing so many times." Something in his tone made Sarah really look at him, perhaps for the first time. Beyond the crisp button-down shirt and the professional demeanor was a man with kind eyes that carried a weight she hadn't noticed before. "After my wife died," he said, his voice dropping to almost a whisper, "I used to watch couples everywhere, at restaurants, in parks, even in grocery stores, and think exactly that. I'd see some small gesture between them and feel this hollow ache." Sarah's practiced professional smile faded. This wasn't a conversation she was prepared for, especially not with an employee she barely knew. "Daniel, Please," he interrupted gently. "I'm not telling you this to make you uncomfortable. I just wanted to say." He took a deep breath. Love doesn't always look like grand gestures and perfect recreations of first dates. Sometimes it's in the quiet moments, the consistent showing up, day after day. He glanced toward the window, gathering his thoughts. My daughter Emma is 8 now. She was only 4 when her mother died. Every night since then, I've sat beside her bed and listened to her prayers, even when I stopped believing in them myself. Every morning, I braid her hair the way her mother used to, even though my fingers still fumble with the strands. I pack her lunch with little notes, just like Lisa did. His eyes returned to Sarah's, unexpectedly intense. That's love too. It's not flashy. No one takes pictures of it for social media. But it's real, and it's deep, and it's every bit as worthy of admiration as anniversary surprises. Sarah sat perfectly still, struck by both his words and the fact that this was more than she'd heard Daniel speak in all the months he'd worked for her company. Why are you telling me this? She asked softly. Daniel's expression softened. Because when you made that comment, I saw something I recognized. And I wanted you to know that sometimes we're so busy looking for love that looks like other people's stories, we miss the love that's already in our own. With that, he stood, buttoning his jacket. Good night, Ms. Matthews. Thank you for dinner. As he walked away, Sarah remained seated, his words echoing in her mind. Something about their brief exchange had pierced through layers of professional distance, touching a truth she'd been avoiding for years. The following Monday, Sarah found herself noticing Daniel in a way she never had before. The careful way he organized his workspace. How he was always the first to refill the coffee pot after taking the last cup. The patient tone he used when explaining complex spreadsheets to the marketing team. She also noticed things about herself, how she'd been measuring her life against an invisible yardstick of achievements and milestones, always finding it somehow lacking despite her professional success. How she'd been waiting for some cinematic version of love while dismissing the meaningful connections already present in her life. 2 weeks after the dinner, Sarah made a decision. She stopped by Daniel's office late one afternoon, finding him focused on his computer screen, his brow furrowed in concentration. Daniel, she said, knocking lightly on his open door. Do you have a minute? He looked up, surprised. Of course, Ms. Matthews. Sarah, she corrected him. I was wondering if you and Emma might like to join me this weekend. The Children's Museum has a new interactive exhibit on space exploration. I have tickets, and I thought. She paused, suddenly feeling uncharacteristically nervous. Well, Emma might enjoy it. Daniel's expression shifted from surprise to something warmer. She would love that, actually. She's been obsessed with astronauts since career day at school. Great, Sarah said, a genuine smile replacing her usual professional one. And maybe afterward, we could grab dinner? Nothing fancy, just somewhere kid-friendly. I'd like that, Daniel replied, his eyes holding hers a moment longer than necessary. We both would. That Saturday marked the beginning of a slow, steady transformation in both their lives. The museum visit led to a pizza dinner where Emma, initially shy, eventually warmed up to Sarah, especially after discovering they shared a love for strawberry ice cream and superhero movies. Daniel watched their interaction with a mixture of caution and hope, his protective instincts as a father balanced against his growing feelings for Sarah. Over the following months, their relationship evolved carefully. Sarah joined them for movie nights at Daniel's modest apartment, where Emma insisted on building a fort out of blankets and couch cushions. Daniel and Sarah had coffee together during lunch breaks, gradually sharing more of their stories. She learned about his childhood in a small coastal town, his dreams of becoming an architect before practical considerations led him to accounting, and the devastating months following his wife's unexpected diagnosis and death. In turn, Sarah revealed parts of herself she rarely showed at work, her passion for amateur photography, the complicated relationship with her high-achieving parents, and her secret fear that her drive for professional success had come at the cost of meaningful personal connections. I think I've been hiding behind my career, she admitted one evening as they walked through the park after dropping Emma off at her best friend's birthday sleepover. It's easier to focus on quarterly goals and market strategies than to risk being vulnerable with someone. Daniel nodded, understanding. After Lisa died, I did the same thing with fatherhood. As long as I was focused entirely on being everything Emma needed, I didn't have to face my own grief or loneliness. Their hands brushed as they walked, and this time, Sarah didn't pull away. Instead, she let her fingers intertwine with his, a small gesture that somehow felt more significant than any grand romantic declaration. The company holiday party that December became a turning point. Sarah had been careful to maintain professional boundaries at work, but as she watched Daniel laughing with colleagues, his usual reserve softened by the festive atmosphere, she realized how deeply her feelings for him had grown. Later that evening, as the party wound down, they found themselves alone in her office, where she'd gone to retrieve her coat. "I never thanked you properly," Sarah said, turning to face him. "For what?" Daniel asked, his expression curious. "For what you said that night at dinner. About love being in the quiet moments, the showing up day after day." She took a step closer to him. "It changed something for me." Daniel's eyes softened. "I meant every word." "I know you did," she replied. "That's what made it matter." Their first kiss was gentle, tentative, a beginning rather than a culmination. When they pulled apart, Sarah saw in Daniel's eyes both hope and hesitation. "Emma," he said simply. Sarah nodded, understanding immediately. "She comes first. Always." "This would change things," he continued. "At work, in our lives. It wouldn't be simple." "The most worthwhile things rarely are," Sarah replied, surprising herself with the certainty she felt. The transition wasn't seamless. There were company policies to navigate, requiring Sarah to recuse herself from decisions directly affecting Daniel's position and compensation. There were Emma's initial concerns about sharing her father's attention, followed by her fears that Sarah might leave them just as her mother had. "But you're the boss," Emma said one evening, her small face serious as she helped Sarah prepare dinner while Daniel worked late. "What if you decide you don't want Daddy to work for you anymore? Will we still see you?" Sarah set down the spoon she'd been using to stir the pasta sauce and knelt to meet Emma's eyes. "Emma, my feelings for you and your dad have nothing to do with work. Even if one of us worked somewhere completely different, that wouldn't change how much I care about you both." Emma considered this, twisting a strand of her hair, a habit Sarah had noticed she shared with her father. "Promise?" "I promise," Sarah said solemnly. "And you know what? Your dad taught me something important about love. It's about showing up, day after day. That's what I intend to do." Emma's smile was worth every complicated moment they'd navigated. By spring, Sarah found herself spending more nights at Daniel and Emma's apartment than at her own sleek downtown condo. Her expensive clothes now shared space with Emma's school uniforms in the laundry basket. Her schedule, once filled exclusively with business meetings and networking events, now included school science fairs and Saturday morning soccer games. One evening, as they sat on the balcony after Emma had gone to bed, Daniel took Sarah's hand. "I've been thinking," he said, his voice thoughtful. "About what you said at that dinner, almost a year ago now." Sarah smiled, remembering. "About wishing someone would love me like Melissa's husband loved her?" Daniel nodded. "I've been wondering if you still feel that way." The question hung between them, weighted with meaning. Sarah took a moment to truly consider it, looking back over the months they'd shared. "No," she said finally. "I don't wish for that anymore." A flicker of uncertainty crossed Daniel's face. "Because now I know there's something better," she continued, squeezing his hand. "What we have, it's not about grand gestures or perfect recreations of special moments. It's about building something new together, day by day. It's about Emma's laughter when we all make pancakes on Sunday mornings. It's about how you still listen to her prayers every night, and now sometimes I get to listen too. She leaned closer to him. It's about how you remember exactly how I take my coffee, and how you always text when you're running late, and how you've never once made me feel like I have to choose between being successful and being loved. Daniel's eyes shone in the dim light. I do love you, Sarah. More than I thought I could love anyone again. I love you too, she replied, the words coming easily now. And I love the family we're becoming. 6 months later, Sarah stood in the back of a small chapel, her heart racing beneath the simple white dress she'd chosen. Through the doorway, she could see Daniel waiting at the altar, handsome in his dark suit. Beside him stood Emma, beaming in her junior bridesmaid dress, proudly holding a small basket of flower petals. As the music began and Sarah prepared to walk down the aisle, she thought about the journey that had brought them here, not a whirlwind romance of grand gestures, but a patient building of trust, a careful blending of lives, and the daily choice to love one another through ordinary moments and challenges alike. When she reached Daniel and Emma, he took her hand, his eyes filled with a quiet joy that spoke louder than any elaborate declaration could. Ready? He whispered. Sarah nodded, squeezing his hand. I've never been more ready for anything. As they exchanged their vows, Sarah thought about that company dinner and her wistful comment that had started everything. She had wished for someone to love her the way Melissa's husband loved his wife, with grand gestures and perfect recreations of special moments. What she'd found instead was something far more precious, a love built on honesty, resilience, and the beauty of everyday commitment. A love that included not just her and Daniel, but Emma too, a family created not from obligation but from choice. Later that evening, as they shared their first dance as husband and wife, Daniel pulled her close and whispered in her ear, "Remember what you said that night at dinner?" Sarah smiled against his shoulder. "I do. I hope you know now," he said softly, "that you are loved, deeply, completely, and in all the ways that truly matter." As they swayed together, Emma joined them on the dance floor, wrapping her arms around both their waists. The three of them moved together in a circle, their own perfect constellation of love, not the kind that makes for viral social media posts or romantic movie scenes, but the kind that sustains through ordinary days and difficult nights, the kind that grows stronger with each small act of showing up for one another. And in that moment, Sarah knew with absolute certainty that she had received something far better than what she had wished for. She had found a love that wasn't about grand gestures or perfect moments, but about building a life together, messy, complicated, and more beautiful than she could have imagined. So if you're out there watching this, perhaps feeling like Sarah once did, wishing for a love that looks like someone else's story, remember that sometimes the greatest love stories aren't the ones with the most dramatic moments, but the ones with the most authentic connections. The ones built day by day, in quiet moments of choosing each other again and again. Like this video if it touched your heart, and subscribe to our channel for more stories that remind us of the power of genuine connection. Because in a world that often celebrates the spectacular, sometimes it's the simple, steady love that truly transforms our lives.